He sees something on the floor and he just has to pick it up. I'm not saying that's a problem, but I'm saying it's a quirk of Kevin that I don't have that quirk. There are a lot of things littered across our floors that do not get picked up by me throughout the day. Welcome to Book Therapy. I'm your host, Kim Patton. There's no way to count how many books are floating around in this world. Some are decent, some are truly terrible, and some are great. Today we're going to take a deep dive into one great book. Together we will discover gems of truth and encouragement to help you face your current season of life. I'm ready, you're ready, let's get this party started. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Book Therapy. Before we jump into today's book, I just wanted to give you a quick update. My manuscript for Nothing Wasted is in the editing stage, which means we are in the final preparations of the manuscript so that it will be ready for you all to read, hopefully as soon as possible, which is like November. But it's very exciting. I like the way that it's shaping out. I have an amazing editor, and I can't wait for you all to read it. If you haven't read the sample chapters, go to my website, kimpatton.com, and there are 3 sample chapters available that you can download for free. It'll only take you a few minutes to read them, and you'll kind of get a feel for what the book is going to be about. I will definitely keep you posted as to the soonest that you'll be able to read, but plan on this fall. As always, thank you so much for your support. Let's dive into the book. Today we are talking about Cherish by Gary Thomas. He is the best-selling author of Sacred Marriage, as well as like 17 or 18 other books. He lives in Houston, Texas with his wife, Lisa. They've been married for over 37 years. He serves on the teaching team at Second Baptist Church. And if you've seen, if you're in the Christian nonfiction aisle and you see any book that starts with sacred, it's probably Gary Thomas's book. He wrote Sacred Marriage, Sacred Influence, Sacred Parenting, and then of course there's many offshoots of devotional books that go with each of those topics. Cherish is one of my favorite marriage books that I've read because it's very lighthearted. There's a positive and uplifting tone that is carried throughout the book that really only comes after a seasoned marriage. I mean, he's been married for a long time. He knows that the best way to really thrive in a marriage is to focus on the positive, to encourage each other, to respect each other, not to harbor bitterness or anger, but to really pour into each other and lift one another up. That's the tone I get with this book. He gives this example on page 126 of how he had kind of a brutal travel schedule, and he woke up the next morning, Sunday morning, after only getting 2 hours of sleep to preach a sermon at his church. His wife posted online that she was shocked that he could manage all of that. He says, "When a wife says something like that publicly, I don't even need to hear what follows. I felt cherished. I felt 10 feet tall. I expected to look in the mirror and see a full head of hair." That's the power of affirming words. Yes, he is balding, but we don't have to talk about that. He says, if you want to see change in your spouse, find a kernel of something good and reinforce it specifically and verbally. This honestly applies to all relationships. How encouraging is it to hear something good compared to the really crappy feeling you get when somebody says something negative? I don't know why it's so easy to say the negative thing or to see the negative thing, but it is. It's that much more important to affirm the positive because that's what's going to be repeated. With children, I mean, there's nothing better than seeing the look on their face when they're so proud of something that they did good and you praise them. They are pleased with themselves. They will do that again. And it helps the relationship immensely. I've also heard this many times when people refer to marriage. On page 153, he says, to keep cherishing each other, it follows that we must be good forgivers, people who are eager to show mercy as we have been shown mercy. The goal of a cherishing marriage is to know each other so well that we know the dark corners and the weak links of each other's personalities and yet still cherish, respect, adore, and move toward each other. The point of this is not to say, I would cherish them if they did this. It would be easier to cherish them if they did this. The people we love are going to stumble in certain ways, most likely the same ways over and over. He also says, Some of you exhaust your friends and even try God's patience by recounting the same thing over and over. Why must they stumble like this? Your friends would do well to say, and if you would listen, you would likely hear God say, if he or she didn't stumble like this, then they would be stumbling like that. If you want to build a marriage in which you keep cherishing each other, you have to get over the hurdle of expecting your spouse to be perfect. Okay, that sounds great. Of course, we don't expect them to be perfect. However, the things that they do struggle with seem to get under our skin because we know them so well. We know that that's the thing that's going to catch them every time. But it's the same thing with me. I have my same temptations. I have my same mistakes that I make all the time. And so when I offer grace to Kevin, I'm inviting him to offer grace to me when I stumble over the same thing for the millionth time. Of course, we all want our people to make different mistakes. Like, come on, give us a little bit of variety. Do something different for a change. But that's just not how we are. We're creatures of habit. We're going to do the same thing over and over. He says it's helpful to just say, hey, this is how he stumbles. This is how she stumbles. And as long as it's not an overly destructive behavior, you can forgive. You can be in a spirit of forgiveness over even the smallest things. The person doesn't even have to ask for forgiveness for you to consciously say, you know what? This is how he messes up. This is what she does when she gets mad. This is what she does when she's hurt. Even though it's painful in the moment to be on the other side of their emotion, if you're the calmer person, you can choose forgiveness without them even knowing and let them off the hook. Because trust me, there will be a time when you want to be let off the hook. Secondly, we see that he encourages us to acknowledge the presence behind the problem. He says on page 161, when you truly cherish someone, you look at the presence behind the problem. If you've accepted that every spouse stumbles in many ways, then you know it's not possible to have the positive presence of a spouse without a corresponding frustration or disappointment. So you look at the frustration as a marker of blessing. Part of cherishing each other really accepts them for who they are as a whole. And you're saying to yourself, I want you in my life. I want you to come home every day. I want to see your face. I want to sleep in the same bed at night. I want to talk, laugh, eat together. I want to enjoy this relationship. That expectation is there probably for both of you. So what are you willing to let go of in order to appreciate the person for who they are and enjoy their presence by letting go of the problems that exist because they are there? For example, when Kevin comes home, he sees something on the floor. It could be the kitchen floor, it could be the living room floor, but he almost always bends down to pick something up off the floor. It could be a toy, it could be a piece of food, it could be anything. But it cracks me up because, you know, he's home. I'm so glad he's home. I try to hug and kiss him and say, I'm glad you're home. The girls, of course, attack him and, you know, start jabbering 100 miles an hour, and Shiloh runs into his legs, and it's just funny, and everybody's happy he's home. But this is his thing that he does. I call him the cleanup fairy. He sees something on the floor and he just has to pick it up. I'm not saying that's a problem, but I'm saying it's a quirk of Kevin that I don't have that quirk. There are a lot of things littered across our floors that do not get picked up by me throughout the day. So what can I say? I have a husband who's slightly OCD and he likes a clean house, and he's not telling me by picking those little things up that my house is a mess and man, what a terrible wife you are. That's not what he's saying. All he's doing is simply reaching down to get something off the floor that caught his eye. Wouldn't I rather have a husband who picks something up than when he gets home, throw something on the floor? I love the presence of Kevin in our family, but we both have quirks that drive each other insane. Still, we are each other's best friends. And when it's all said and done, I want him in my house. I want him in my life, and I will do anything to keep him here. So that means I have to learn to let some things go. He talks about on page 64 of this experiment that Dr. John Gottman did with couples. He divided them into two groups. He notes that throughout each person's day, one partner will make regular bids for the other's attention. In our language, we could describe these bids as the question, Do you still cherish me? What the person does in response to these bids has a huge impact on marital connection and happiness. Throughout the day, these relationships have interactions. They seem very mundane. Let's say one person loves birds. They may turn and say, "Look at that beautiful bird." They're not just talking about a bird. They're excited. The bird means something to them, but what they're really saying is, "Hey, that really brings me joy." So the other person has a choice. They can either turn toward or turn away. The statistics about this study is really fascinating because 3 out of 10 of the bids that were met, those relationships did not last. However, the other couples that stayed together, they turned toward each other 87% of the time. What this represents is meeting each other's emotional needs. Gary Thomas says on page 65, "There's no middle ground. Her bid is either met or rejected. Cherishing is expressed or it's not. Intimacy is built or it is assaulted, even in the most mundane marital conversations." I know this can be really convicting because we can all think of times where the person we love has given us a bid for our attention. And whatever they're talking about is not important to us. So I know I'm guilty of many times ignoring or brushing off what Kevin has said because it doesn't interest me, or I'm busy, or I can't possibly see how that is fascinating to him. But the same thing is true about me. There's been many times where I talk about things and it's of no interest to him. There is this sort of language that I've adopted, which this is not in the book, and I don't even know if I would recommend it. But basically, I say, "Hey, you're not going to care about this, but," and then I kind of launch into my little spiel. It gives Kevin the opportunity to say, "Okay, awesome. I don't really have to care about this, but she does want me to listen right now." And so that's probably not great communication, but I do want to let him off the hook a little bit because I may need to express something, but I really don't need him to care about it. I just need him to care about me as a person and let me know that he's listening regardless. Lastly, we have some practical tips. This book is filled with practical tips. He has story after story and example after example of all of these couples that he's met with and what's going on in their marriage and how one person did things well or one person did not do things well, and you learn that way. But there's just so many good specific ideas. I loved hearing about the details of these stories. On page 103, he says, "One wife gave her husband a journal she had worked on for an entire year. It listed everything she noticed about him throughout the year, specific things he had done on specific days that made her glad to be married to him." And then he gives 3 examples. "Thank you for hanging the Christmas lights when it was freezing outside. It was so cold that it must have been terrible. I wouldn't have wanted to do it, but you did. Thank you for traveling. I know it must be hard. I could see how tired you were when you walked out the door today. And thank you for coming home, eager to spend time with the children. You're such a good father." This husband read the journal entirely in one sitting. He said to a friend later, "Reading that journal makes me aspire to be the man she thinks I am." In the same vein, when Gary and Lisa got married, Lisa started a journal called Gary. She wrote down things she noticed about him, what he liked, what irritated him, little things that he mentioned. She was trying to study him in a way similar to taking notes at a college lecture. This is important because the word specific. Not only are you telling your person that you love them, you're telling them how and why and when you felt love for them and you chose love for them. That's really powerful. This is also one of my favorite things. They talk about how experiential purchases are better for the relationship because it satisfies higher order needs. I don't know exactly what that means. I mean, I know the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you have like shelter and food, and then you have emotional needs and safety and all that. So I'm guessing higher order needs is like higher emotional needs, maybe. But instead of buying a physical product for one another, what if you gave them an experience instead? What this tells the other person is that you see them and you see what makes them happy. So like season tickets to their favorite teams, games, or classes in photography if that's something that they're interested in but can't afford or wouldn't buy it for themselves. I remember last summer when we moved to Georgia, I was really excited to be in the same state as Six Flags. And so we organized a trip and went there for our anniversary. And that was really cool. Spending a whole day together riding roller coasters was the best. This also applies to children. I mean, when you're going to a birthday party and there's 50 million presents and you're the one who gives them an experience instead, annual pass to the zoo or the aquarium or theater tickets. I mean, little kids may not be ready for the ballet yet, but if you time it right and you give a child an experience that they get to do with the people they love, I mean, even something as simple as going out to ice cream with their parents. I'm not saying toys are bad. You know what I mean? We talked about how to praise the good, how to recognize the presence behind the problem, and he gave us some practical tips for how to cherish each other. I'm going to end with a really convicting thought, which is near the end of the book. He says on page 183, few things last in life like marriage. You can pour yourself out on behalf of your kids, but if they're emotionally and physically healthy, they're eventually going to leave your home and start lives of their own. What I'm saying is that for your own happiness and satisfaction, be wary of the solitary pursuits and energies that steal the joy and wonder of being in a marriage in which you truly cherish each other. You cannot cherish your spouse if you're obsessed with pleasing yourself. That's really what it comes down to. Pleasing each other is worth it. We give stuff up in order to have this gift called marriage. We give things up in order to have good, solid relationships with other people, with children. Throughout this book, there are so many examples that Gary gives about he and his wife, and his wife has been gracious enough to let him include all of these really personal examples. Those details are what builds a good, healthy marriage. It's in the conversations in the kitchen, the planning of the budget or the planning of the vacation, the repeated acts of going to church together or eating meals together. All of those things, that's really what makes you feel connected with each other. Thank you for listening to another episode of Book Therapy. Today's book was Cherish by Gary Thomas, the one word that changes everything for your marriage. I would highly recommend any of his marriage books. They are not all this light and fluffy. I would say most of his books are heavier on the topic of marriage and relationships. So what I have done with his books in the past is gone through them with my mentor, and we've talked after each chapter and kind of dove in deeper to the points that he makes. He really is a great teacher, and so I've always learned a lot from his books and would highly recommend them. I, of course, love to write all things down, and if I kept a journal for